Most people leave ministry and don't talk about it. They post a vague verse on Instagram, they shake some hands, and they disappear. And the people left behind, they assume he or she's okay. He's a pastor, she's a pastor, they're fine. But here's what I know personally. The moment you walk out of that building for the last time, something breaks, something changes. And nobody in the church trained you for what happens next. My guest today spent 18 years in ministry. He walked through burnout, relational loss, and vocational collapse and came out on the other side. Not just surviving, but coaching other men and women through it, building something that didn't exist when they needed it. This conversation is for every man and woman who gave everything to the church and had it figured out who he was all over again. Let's get into it. My friend, Evan Doyle, thanks for being on, and we'll jump with the first question. 30-second version, as short as you can. Who is Evan Doyle? Where are you from? What are you doing? What's going on? Give us an introduction.
Well, Chandler, I'm happy to be with you. Thanks for the invite. I'm a husband. I'm a father. Live in Cincinnati, Ohio area. I was a pastor for 18 years. In 2020, I decided to step out of that, and ever since that, I've been doing a lot of content, a lot of marketing, and coaching as well. So it's been quite the journey, and happy to be with you today, man.
Yeah, and I'll say this for everyone watching and listening, and I've even had someone ask me, with I think this is going to be episode 7 or 8, so not a lot, but we're getting there. And I had somebody ask me, like, hey, how do you find your guests? And I said, most of my guests, and even a lot of my friends, are all social media. And even for, Evan, how we got connected is he was posting content and it popped up on my For You page on TikTok, and watched a couple videos, liked what he was talking about. I was just like, hey, man, love what you're saying, love what you're doing. And just that might have been earlier this year, might have been even the end of the last year. I can't remember. I've been following your content for a while, and so I knew I had to get you on. So I want to say thank you for being here. It's going to be a great one. The next question, with what you're doing, the in between, you've got your own podcast, right? And we'll link that down below as well. The in between, kind of talk to me a little bit. Where did that name come from?
Yeah, so the in between, really, it just kind of envelops that space that we sometimes find ourselves in when we enter into transition, and where the past is no longer really option or viable, and the future isn't necessarily certain or clear, and you find yourself in this space where you're trying to make sense out of the world that you're living in, where everything that was familiar is kind of in the past, and you're still trying to make sense out of the next step and what you're going to do next. So that's kind of the heartbeat behind that name.
Yeah, I love it, and I really can't wait to talk more about this, even more, because this is going to be a great conversation, because I really do feel like this is something that a lot of people don't talk about. And I want to ask you this too. Do you feel like when it comes to transition, and I think for you and I specifically, it has to do maybe more with ministry to whatever you want to call it, marketplace, non-full-time ministry. But have you found that transition is not the issues, the struggles, whatever it may be, the tension in transition it's not just solely to like the ministry to marketplace, but in other transitions of work or life, stuff like that?
Yeah, I think, for me, that the transition out of ministry into the marketplace, that was primarily my context. So I was a pastor for 18 years. That was the world that I knew. I'd done it long enough where I felt like, I was, there were areas where I felt like I knew I was strong in. I knew, after you do stuff for a little while, you start to feel like you have a little bit of a handle on, at least what it might take to do a good job. And so when I stepped out of that, everything kind of becomes new. And so for me, yes, that was my context, leaving ministry. But transition, I mean, there are so many different types of transitions that we can experience in our life, whether you move from one city to another. Right now, my oldest son's getting married, so that means he's going to be leaving the house. That's a transition for me and my wife, and not just for me and my wife, but even for my family, because he has younger brothers, and he's not going to be living here in the house anymore. You know, you
Gonna
could
be a
lose a loved
transition
one. There's
transition on
all
your
types
budget.
of transition. What's that?
You're gonna have a transition on your budget.
Exactly. Transition can happen in any area of our life.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, 18 years is a long time to, I was, my transition, I was pretty close, but not 18 years. And so I want to talk about that a little bit. When it comes to ministry, like, how'd you get into it? Like, take us back to the beginning. How'd you get into ministry?
I mean, I was a young kid. I had a rough go through my high school years. Kind of, you hear these testimonial stories where someone's life radically gets transformed, and that was kind of my story. I became a follower of Jesus and got involved in a church and started volunteering in our youth ministry, and just started to build relationships inside of the church. And couple years, 2-3 years into that, I had at that point met who was, my wife now. She was heavily involved in the youth ministry as well and volunteering. We were those types of volunteer leaders. We were at everything. We used vacation time to go to the summer camps, to be at the events, all that kind of stuff. And so a transition actually happened from the person that was the youth pastor that we were kind of serving under as volunteers. He was no longer at the church, and the opportunity was kind of presented to my wife and I, if, hey, would you want to become the youth pastor of the church? And so I was young. I was 20, 21, something like that. I mean, had no idea what I was doing. But yeah, that's kind of how we got thrown into that whole world.
It's crazy. So I'm assuming over the 18 years your role was of many things, like youth ministry. What all? I always tell people they ask you, when you're in ministry, like, what do you do? And I would say, well, are you asking me what my job title is, or what I actually like? What's my responsibilities? Because those are two very different things.
Yeah. I mean, 18 years at the same church, and not only that, but also a relatively fast growing church. I mean, the town that the church was in, we're talking population of like 12, 13,000 people, when the church was maybe at its largest, 3,000, 3,500 people coming to a church in a small little town like that. And so, one of the great things about an experience like that is when things are fast growing and fast moving, you get the opportunity to try a lot of different things, and there's actually a necessity for you to wear a lot of different hats. So yeah, I mean, all kinds of stuff. Youth pastors, starting our small groups, launching small groups, leading volunteer teams, executive pastor, campus pastor. I mean, just, all kinds of things. Pretty much everything besides like the children's pastor for like young
Same.
kids and
Same.
and finance, which I knew for me, like, that just was never going to be a good fit. But pretty much anything besides like young kids and finances, I mean, had the opportunity to do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. So let's talk about within the 18 years, what were maybe some, you can call them, tipping points of is this what I really want to do? Am I supposed to do this, or I'm done with this? Like, was there one moment? Were there multiple moments? What did those look like?
I think there was multiple moments. I mean, when I was in my late 20s, I wouldn't say mid 20s, 26 or so, I felt this compelling to move to San Bernardino, California. I was 5 years into youth pastoring. Felt compelled to plant the church out there. You're we had just bought our first house, and when you're young and you have, and in these like radical circles of faith, you take big crazy steps. And so we moved out to California. We lived out there for 2 years. We did plant the church,
Oh, wow.
but it just was, it was rough. I mean, when I had my taxes done, the person preparing our taxes asked if we had actually taken a vow to poverty, because like our income was that low. And I'm in my I'm 26, 27, got a wife, two young babies. My wife had her own things that she was working through as well. And so it was just like one of those things where we needed to come home back to where we were from. And so I think that was one of those things where it was like, is that the path for me? And then as I, got into my early 30s, I discovered this whole world of online marketing, content creation, blogs, the whole world of SEO. So this would have been in like 2013 or something. And got really, got in the early days of like Pat Flynn, or this other guy named 48 Days to the Work You Love by Dan Miller.
Yeah. Legends.
Yes, absolute legends. Just got really intrigued by the information and the things that they were sharing. And so that was another marker where I was like, you know what, I have a lot of interest. And I was, and I still live in that world, but I had some early successes in that whole world, just with little side hustles and side projects, and started to see some early indicators of like, oh, I can create stuff online, and it can reach people, and it can grow. And so that kind of was also swirling in my head, like, well, what would it look like for me to like venture out into that space? And then I think just more towards the end, as I got older, mid to late 30s, I think the church that I was in as well, like, I think I just started to see things differently from my leader. And I'm not saying one was right or one was the other, but one was right or one was wrong, but we just saw things differently. I think we valued different things. And, when you value different things, there's always going to be tension. And I think I just realized, like, some things I don't think, some values I think, we can move on, and others I think if we're not willing to move on them, there's always going to be tension. And so that, when I decided to step out of ministry, that would have been in 2020, right as COVID hit, like March, something like that. And I kind of thought to myself, if not now, then when? And through a series of like really just kind of unique, interesting conversations, I just came to the conclusion, like, I think now is as good as time as any. And if sometimes there are dreams, there are desires, there are things within our heart that we need new environments in order for those things to have the opportunity to flourish. And I think that was the case for me at that time. I think I just needed new environments, and not just in that church context, and in several different areas of my life, for some of the things that were like residing in my heart for a long time. I think I needed new environments for those to have some opportunity to breathe and grow a little bit. So yeah, in 2020, stepped down from my role as one of the pastors in that church, and went on a whole nother wild journey up to this point as well. So
That's crazy. I want to go back to the church plant because, I mean, moving from Midwest Cincinnati 513 to California, I mean, it's two completely different worlds. You're old enough, you're at your late 20s, you're old enough to know a little bit, but young enough in most cases to not know enough. So you just, you'll try anything. But that's a big move, especially with, a wife, two kids. How is that like the reality of, man, I don't think we can keep this going, shutting that down and moving back. I mean, I kind of want to dive into that because I'd love to know, man, that's not an easy pill to swallow, to go start something and go, yeah, I think we got to go back.
yeah. Well, I think like at the time, especially being young, you try to find ways to make it make sense. God's not asking us to be successful. God's asking us to be faithful. And we feel like God's telling us to come back home. And so that makes it sound like, and maybe we were, maybe we weren't. I'm okay with however it was at this point.
Yeah.
But would it have been more faithful to stay? Was it an act of faith to come home? I'm not sure, but I know for the sake of my family, it was probably the best for us to come home. So you try to find ways in the moment to make it make sense, and sometimes you do the best with the information, with the insight, with the knowledge that you have at the time. And so I mean, that's just how it was. You feel like you try to do what's right, and then sometimes when it doesn't go right, my challenge would be don't try to find ways to make it fit the narrative that you feel most comfortable with. What would it look like for you to just embrace the season for what it is, and try to go through it as humbly and as gracefully as possible? Because we of course you want to look like, I want it to look like the the guy who knew what he was doing, but in reality I had no idea what I was doing.
I mean, at what point within the church plant, I mean, was it like, was it a metric, an emotion, like, what was it that made you, outside
I mean,
of obviously God, like, I know, but was it just like, man, I don't think this is what we're supposed to do?
there was the certainly the financial aspect. Like I had said, I don't know, I think I said this, like we were living well below
Yeah.
the poverty line. My um you know my wife, she shared her own story, which I would encourage you, if you're listening, to go. Her name's Tiffany Doyle. I'm sure you can find some of her stuff online as well, and bits and pieces of where she shared her story. But there was some of her own personal demons and things that she was wrestling with that I would say accentuated some of the challenging circumstances that we were facing out there. And my inability as a husband or as a leader to know how to be supportive or to help navigate or walk through those things. And then honestly, I think too, like the metrics of caring way too much about what I thought something should look like at that point in time of the church or the ministry. I mean, the church, when we went out there, we just immediately just started doing outreach stuff. Like we weren't doing any type of we weren't holding services or that kind of thing. We were just like going down to the skate park and feeding kids that were at the skate park, and that was an amazing time. We started holding Bible studies at Cal State San Bernardino and just doing that kind of stuff. But then, at a certain point, it's like, okay, we're gonna hold our first service, and on a big average Sunday, might have had like 30, 35 people. On a really low Sunday, it might have been like 12 or 15. And, on our Christmas outreach service, we had like over 200 some people come because we were giving away gifts and different things like that. So, it was probably okay that it was a church that was 20, 30 people. And, when it's at that size or whatever size you think it should be, it's a real wrestling match between where your security is coming from as an individual or as a follower of Christ, as a pastor, as a leader, all of those things. Because if it's primarily coming from some of those places, it typically is not going to end well. So, it was a mixed bag of things, man.
Yeah. What do you feel like the biggest thing you learned, maybe specifically about like church planning, but then even just when it comes to, ministry as a whole?
From that time?
Yeah.
I would say, count your costs. You know what I mean? Like, count your costs. And I see, I also think differently. I'm 45 now, so even how I think about church today is very different from how I did even 10 years ago. I don't mean that I don't believe in the value of church, but just how I think about church is different. So, what do you value around what a church is and what it can offer, and what it does? I think having clarity around those things could be super helpful, because if I thought about church the way I do today, 20 some years ago when I moved my family out to California, I might have been okay with the 20 or 30 people.
Yeah.
But I thought, bigger is the best sign of things being good.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. So then you came back. What was that transition like? I mean,
Yeah,
did you go back
so
on staff at the church, or what was that?
shortly after, I came back, I had some friends. I started working, doing like construction stuff for a couple months. Then I went and worked at this building supply distributor. I knew like one of like the managers, regional managers within this company. They were looking to grow, open up new locations, and so I was hired to help actually be a part of opening one of these other new locations. I did that for about a year and a half, and then went back on staff at the church that I had actually was originally hired at as the youth pastor before I had moved out to California. So came back on staff and started doing like leading like all of our volunteer, like a large part of our Sunday teams that helped like just make things go so like all of our hospitality teams, a lot of our like discipleship stuff. That's when I got into like, we wanted to transition from like Wednesday night service to launching small groups. That was kind of when all that, a lot of those kind of became my responsibility during that time period. And honestly, as far as like my role in the church space, that was probably Um, the most uh, the most fun I had as far as like working in that role was leading and building and growing and managing some of those teams. I just really enjoyed that season.
Which I feel like that's a pretty unique situation that, and you know, a lot of times we only know what we know from our own experiences. The fact that they sent you, but you went and planted, and then you came back a year, and then you came back on staff. I mean, that's pretty. In my opinion, that's pretty cool to see to see that transition. Obviously, there was a still a relationship there, and 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 then like I said, getting back in, but within that the second, so you came back, went on staff. How long before how how long were you back on staff before you stepped off?
Probably, let me think for a minute. Like, so 2013, 2014, like 6 or 7 years, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, yeah. So a good amount of time. What do you feel like it changed your your perspective when it comes to being on a church staff in ministry, having other side of the country, coming back, you know, again, you're in California, now you're back at the Midwest, different cultures. Was there a perspective shift for you in the way that you even did ministry when you came back on the church staff?
Yeah. I mean, that time out in California, like any type of struggle, um, that you're able to like survive or get through, typically it is, I think there's some cliche, like it will make you stronger. And two, like when you're like trying to launch a church, you're working a job, you're out doing like you're juggling all of these things. When you're able to, it just created a whole new appreciation for like, it was at a larger church. It was at a more established, by that point, the church was a little more established in all kinds of ways, just within the community, financially, with its reputation. Like, it just gave me a whole new appreciation for those, uh, for wanting to be the type of teammate that's able to like contribute and bring value and just an appreciation for what the church was and what it had to offer. Just even me as a member of the church, as a member of the staff, just kind of, yeah, it helps you see things a little differently.
That's good. Was there within the the church plan, and you talked a little bit about your wife's story and struggles, and then coming back? Was there any, or well, I'll ask this: when you came back, where did you? How long was it, or what was the time when maybe there was tension building, or maybe you were just like you know ready to cash it in, give up, whatever that was where when was that moment?
I mean, that was probably the last few years, last few years before I decided to like step away and do something different. So it was in those last few years. We had uh, we had a we had a campus, and the individual that we launched that campus with, he decided to step away, didn't want to do it anymore, which is totally respect and honor and understand. But there was no one to kind of uh, fill that role. Um, I was asked to fill that role. And really, I was willing to do it, but ideally under like, I'm the interim pastor and this is more of a short-term solution, but it kind of turned into a long-term solution. And then the differences between operating as um, a single location. You add 2 locations, the complexities get different, which I know that a lot of church people who have done campuses understand this kind of thing. And then if you add a 3rd campus, which that was also a part of the conversation, it doesn't just get a little different; it gets even more complex. So, working through some of the operational things that it would require for us to function as a team in a healthy way, as 2 campuses and also preparing for 3 campuses. Um, some of those dynamics and aspects just became a challenge, and that was where some of that was coming from for me, because I was kind of I was bringing to the table some of the strategic um, ways that we might need to operate differently in order for us to make these kinds of changes and leaps. And um, it just it's okay. Like, if we don't want to do that, that's fine. Let's just say it. But if we are going to keep doing this, in my opinion, here's how I think it could happen. And it just was, I think we just saw things differently, and I didn't want to keep living in that tension and in that, you know, in that type of world. So yeah, I was ready to move on, man.
So when you were making that, when that transition season started, did you know what you wanted to do next?
I mean, I had been growing some websites on the side, doing like content marketing stuff. Like I said, like in 2013, I kind of jumped into that whole world and started creating little sites here and there. And so I knew some of that was possible. So there was that. And then I also had a friend who was, he had a small business, and his business was growing, and he was looking to make a couple hires. And so I had actually reached out to him expressing interest, if he was looking to grow his team, I would be interested in being considered for one of those roles. And I didn't have a whole lot of insight into exactly what I wanted to do. And so, yeah, when I did leave, I went and worked for my buddy, his small business. And because of my background in marketing and that kind of thing, pretty much took over like just any of the like online marketing uh, endeavors that we were taking on. So growing his websites, growing his social media, all that kind of stuff.
God, there's so many questions. Um, Maybe I'll shift the angle a little bit, and I want to ask this question because maybe there is someone that is thinking or is processing, or maybe who's recently transitioned. What Maybe talk to us about what did you do well, and what do you feel like, man, I would, if I could have done this differently, this is what I would have done when it comes to making this jump.
Hmm. Hmm. What I did well, I think, is I tried to exit as gracefully and as honorably as possible, and attempted to elevate relationships above roles, or um, that kind of thing, or organization. So I also tried to prioritize, my kids' needs. At the time, my kids were teenagers. That was all they knew. That was the only thing that they knew. And so I didn't want to be too disruptive in their lives, from like changing churches, that kind of thing. So I think I tried to be considerate of the lives, my family.
Yeah.
Um, Things that I wish I would have done differently in some areas is like, and this is a thread in my life that I am just recently uncovering thanks to counseling and all kinds of stuff. But that I can start to tell myself a story about the future. And if I don't like what the story is, I will find ways to get out of it. And, if I look back on, if we look back to California, what story was I telling myself, and what just radical, drastic steps, or maybe not, I wouldn't even call them steps. I would say like leaps did I take that probably could have, I probably could have used measured steps, that could have kept myself or my family in more secure places, whether that's financially or emotionally or whatever the case may be. So I would try to, like, I tend to think of them now as more as experiments. What are things that I can experiment and test to get data? Because feedback and data is just useful information that we can use to make better decisions. And so rather than taking these giant leaps, like, what are the tests and experiments that we can run? And maybe we run those tests and experiments for a week, 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever the time frame is appropriate, to gather data that helps us make like more informed decisions. So I think I think I could have done better at running experiments instead of like just taking these big leaps.
Do you ever have moments where you're like, man, I don't think I should have gone to California and planted that church?
No, no,
No.
no. I mean, I think I'm honestly trying to remember, like, maybe in the early days of like moving back home or something like that, but no, no regrets around that. Like, it was, at the time it was uh significantly difficult. But no, I don't ever feel that way about going out there, at least not at this point in my life.
Yeah. You know, I've had this thought, and I think I've seen it a lot, but I'd love to kind of get your intake. I think when it comes to, especially, for you, even for me, which when I was back in Oklahoma, the church I was at was my wife's family's church. So it was, you know, very, you know, very multi-layered. But I think a lot of times what maybe someone who doesn't understand being on staff at a church is it is your church. If you have kids, they go there. You don't just work there, but you're there on the weekends. You're leading small groups and you're in groups. And so when it comes to any kind of transition, I feel like it's almost always complicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Um, and I think that's where, for me, and I think for a lot of people, it's, man, how do you navigate that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like for you, like for me, I didn't. My first transition with the church was I had no. It was there was no choice. It was pure chaos, and so there was multiple layers of things that was just our world blew up. But I think for yours, for you, having coming to this moment of I think it's time to do something else, but still having to like, hey, I got kids, they've grown up here, they've got friends and you know parents and coaches and all that stuff. I mean, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I do go back to a lot is like your values. Like, what do you value? Because when you know what you value, it makes decisions easier to make. And instead of asking questions like, what if I make the wrong decision? What if I'm doing the wrong thing? You start to ask completely different questions, which are more like, well, does this align with what I value? Does this align with what I believe? Does this align with the type of individual that I want to be? Does this align with the type of individual that I'm working on becoming? Those two different sets of questions position you to make completely different decisions from completely different places. One, you're operating out of like fear. What if I make the wrong decision? What if this isn't right? What if I regret this? Versus, well, I know what I value, and because I know what I value, it doesn't necessarily make the decision easier to make. It just makes knowing what to do a little easier. And answering questions like, is this aligning with who I'm becoming? Is this aligning with the things that I believe are important and with the things that I value? Those are completely different questions than, geez, I hope I don't do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And so I would start there. Like, what do you value? Like, what do you value out of a church? What do you value as a member of a church? If you're on staff, what do you value out of a team? If you're a husband, like, what do you value as the type of husband or the type of father that you want to be to your kids? Like, beginning to get some clarity and some language around those things makes the decisions just feel less complex.
Yeah, that's so good. I remember when we were trying to figure out, I think it'd been 2019, our church had shut down and it was just mass chaos. And there was so much fray and noise. Even to this day, it's almost even hard to piece everything together. But I remember a conversation that I was having with some good pastor friends, and thank God for good people. And they said the same thing. We were trying to figure out, what do we do? Where do we go? And they said, listen, before you do anything, before you move or even go to another church or potentially take a job at another church, they said, what do you want? What are you looking for? What's important to you? And they just encouraged us, hey, write down what do in the church, whether it's a church we go to or a church that we may potentially go get a job out, because we were in such crisis that it was like, man, we don't have very much savings. We've got to, like, we didn't have very much time. No, we got to go get it. We got to feed I got to take care of my family. We got to, cover the mortgage, all that stuff. And they said, listen, before you do anything, you need to write down what really matters to you when it comes to a church, whether you're going to work there or not, and write those things down. And we did. And what's funny is when we did that, and then we started looking around and having conversations, and hey, church got my, friends or people, hey, would you want to come here? It made it so much easier, because it was like, nope, because this is what we valued. And because honestly, if we wouldn't have done that, oh my God, dude, we probably would have ended up 2 or 3 different places and just been absolutely miserable, just because we were making a decision based on, needing a job and money, and not, okay, what really matters to us.
Yes, 100%. I mean, you just hit the nail on the head. You can make some of those decisions just less complicated and more clear because you understand why you're making those decisions.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a personal question, because as someone, we've been in kind of similar situations, and obviously it's been a little while now, but when was it for a while when you were not on staff, and I'm sure there was a season of trying to find the next church or whatever, but even then, but even now, does it still feel weird sometimes to just show up and, you walk in, you sit in the service, you see a few people, obviously you're going to serve whatever, but then it's like you leave and you're not having to worry about the screen and the mics and the sound and the crying baby. Like, is it still, what's that? Is there still any, I don't know, feelings, emotions when sometimes you sit in church, you're like, man, I'm here. And maybe that's just me.
It's no, for sure. I think early on, like when, I was at that church, I worked there for 18 years. I was a part of that church for 20, 23 years, something like that, a long time, because we stuck around. After I stepped down, we still stayed there for like 2 more years because, like I said, my older sons were in their teenage years, and we didn't know um, where we wanted to go next into a church body. I think initially it was kind of weird just because, people still called you, people
Yes.
still knew me as a pastor or called me certain things or,
Hey,
but
Pastor, I've got a question. You're like, no, I don't. Hard to explain, but
yeah, if it's about your life, something like that, gladly. But if it's about like the operations and the functions of the church or someone on staff,
yeah.
or you're going to have to talk to them because I'm no longer on that team. But, yeah, overall though, it was just relief for me, like just relief. Even sometimes now when I do some coaching and consulting with pastors, um, and we get into some of the issues or the problems that they deal with, I'm like, man, I'm glad that I don't live in that space or in that world, or that my time isn't consumed and taken up by some of the problems that they deal with, because you know and I don't know how I want to say this, but I think sometimes too in the church world we just make problems bigger than they need to be, and it gets very like drama infused. I love problem solving, and some of this is just my personality. Like I'm very objective. Everything filters through my head and through my brain before it filters through my emotions. And other people, they filter things through their emotions first, and that's not wrong or right. But I do think sometimes in the church world, we tend to, at least in some of the circles that I am familiar with, like we tend to make the problems more escalated and more emotional, perhaps than they need to be. So I don't miss that kind of like drama infused approach to to having to
Yeah.
solve problems.
No, I don't. I don't either. So you stayed. So you stayed 2 years. I feel like that's impressive. So the transition after you stepped out from the church you'd been at basically your whole life, that must have been a good that must have been a decent transition for you guys to stay around for 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we tried to prioritize the relationships above like roles or titles or the church or any of that kind of stuff. Like, how do we keep relationships um, prioritized? And, there's always room for communicating better and that kind of thing. And, especially when you work with people that you care about or friends, I think sometimes you think that you're better at communicating than you really are. And, you and I were talking ahead of time before we hopped on here about different tools that can help facilitate communication and bring understanding amongst teammates and that kind of thing. And just trying to practice communication to keep things open and that kind of thing. So yeah, from that regard, there really wasn't anyone trying to get us to leave, and we really at the time didn't have intentions or desires to leave. But as time went on, again, like values just began to become more clear about maybe things that we valued, and it just made more sense for us to to move on and just go somewhere different. And so yeah, we eventually and you know what, when I went looking for a new church, I didn't want to like church hop and bounce around and visit 100 different churches and that kind of thing. And I tell people this now too. I actually have an Instagram post about it. Like, instead of doing a bunch of visits to other churches, the first thing I did was like, there was churches that I already like appreciated that were around the country. And like, we were also talking like, you want something to take off, or you got a product or a tool, get a church to start using that tool, and then other churches will follow. And so like I knew that there were other churches that were probably using similar language or similar models for ministry. And so I just started with some of that language, like uh, spiritual transformation, Cincinnati, Church of the City, Cincinnati. And sure enough, started to find some churches that were using some of that similar language. And then took it a step further. I'm like, okay, like now who's the pastor? Hopped on their Instagram, hopped on their social media feeds. Who are they following? They were following some of the same pastors that I appreciated. And like, so like it made those first initial visits like super easy because like there was already alignment in what I valued. And so, yeah, when it came time, it was just more about like, what do I value out of a church, and how can I quickly identify what this church or this pastor values? And we didn't bounce around. The church that we visited the first time, that's the church that we're still connected to and a part of now for like 3.5 years because there's alignment in what we value.
Yeah. That's good. What are maybe one or two few things that obviously you were at the same church for a really long time, which is very rare. Not only were you at that church, you worked at that church, you stepped down, you were at the church for a couple of years. Now you're in the marketplace. What, for those that may be listening, pastors, what would you tell them, like knowing what you know now, what you've been through when it comes to their church, maybe even their staff, that like, man, I wish, I wish more pastors understood this when it comes to, their team, their staff.
Concerning their team and their staff, like just what would it look like for you to take a step back and seek to create some self-awareness around yourself, like, and consider like the impact that you and your team have on each other, either from a lack of self-awareness or a lack of emotional intelligence. Because when those things are lacking or broken, it's not just a season of difficulty, it's actually the culture. And so when those things are lacking or not present, everything is going to slow down tremendously. Like when trust, because all of that just leads to broken trust. And when there's broken trust, everything slows down. Decisions become more difficult to make. Ministries get siloed. Individuals get silenced, the whole nine yard. And instead, when those things are present, when things like communication, when things like competency, when things like character are prioritized and actually supported, and there's systems and structures in place to help like those things to be developed and to occur, well, trust accelerates everything. Decisions become easier to make, work becomes more fun, culture becomes more healthy. And so yeah, I would want to say, like, what would it look for you and your teammates to have a practice to kind of step outside of yourselves, consider the impact that you're having on each other by like considering, like, is there any effort of self-awareness and emotional intelligence going on in order for us to like not always point the finger at someone else being the problem, but maybe how culture has gotten this way is because of the habits, the beliefs, and the behaviors that we are operating in accord. Like, we can believe the Bible and we can believe it all, but then there are these behaviors, and there are beliefs that are underlying the behaviors that are being exhibited, and those are the things that are actually driving the culture. And so how could we look at what those beliefs are and those behaviors are to consider, like, maybe we need to change them or do something different if we want a different culture? That, again, like, I didn't think that I I didn't think that I had anything that I wanted to share on like church culture and all of that kind of stuff. But as I got into talking about transition and talking to lots of pastors and church leaders who wanted to make transitions, inevitably it always comes down to culture. Most of the time.
Yeah.
Most of the, like, think, and whether you're in the marketplace or wherever, you don't leave necessarily because of the money or because you want to just do something different. A lot of times it comes down to your manager, to your boss, to the culture. And it's no different in the church space. And I didn't think that I really had anything to say about that or wanted to say anything about that. But the more people that I talked about transition, the more I realized, well, a lot of these people are just moving on because of different aspects within the culture. And so, yeah, if you want to see what I think about church culture and ways to maybe think about doing culture differently, like you could check out my Instagram, and I've got other resources and tools
Yeah. And
for that kind of stuff too.
I'll link all your stuff down, and I'll give you a description if anybody wants to connect with you, because your content is so good. It's helped me, and I've got so many more questions that we didn't even get to. But I want to ask, we're gonna kind of jump into these last few little quick questions. And I'm just going to kind of ramble off a few and just want you to try to answer them as quickly and short as possible. If you need to, you don't have to, but I just like to kind of get some of these out. They're kind of fun, and get some quick questions. Hardest season of your life in 3 words.
The year 2021.
Hey, we're right there with you. See, that's a problem. We were too linear. Like, I needed either one of us to but we're here now.
Yes.
One thing that church, and again, this is, whatever, it's fine. It'll be a good clip. One thing most churches get right about transitions.
Encouraging you to trust God and to believe that He's good and faithful.
What's one thing that most churches get completely wrong about transitions?
That it's not okay. I think we get so locked into, well, this is your church, or this is your role, or this is your title, or this is your calling. And I think it, in some ways, boxes us in, or maybe creates this unintentional fear of ever growing or developing or doing anything beyond the current context that we are most familiar with, like pastoring, the version of church that you are most familiar with, the title that you currently hold. That is just one context for the uniqueness of your gifting, of your role, of what you bring to the table. But that's certainly not the only context where you can function, operate, and bring value. And it it could be completely okay for you to transition and to use who you are and what you've acquired and the giftings, experience, skills that you have in a completely different context.
Wow, that's good. If you could say one thing to a pastor who's about to walk out the door for the last time of a church, what would it be?
What you did was important, but your calling is not over. It's just getting started, and all of the experience, the skills, and things that you might not even be aware of that reside within you from everything that you've done and been through has the potential to bring tremendous value to other people in the future, if you'll just give it the opportunity to breathe a little and to see that that it's possible. That you hold tremendous potential.
That's great. Does a healthy exit from ministry actually exist, or is it always going to hurt?
Um, I think I think it's probably always going to hurt, but I think there's different. It's a spectrum of how much it's going to hurt, and I think some of that's going to be based on how healthy the exit was, your relationships, the time that you have invested, all of that kind of stuff. I think the measure that it hurts is going to depend on different factors.
That's good. Last two questions for you, and this could be, really any time, but what's a book, a resource, maybe it's a podcast that you've listened to that or read that you think everyone should read or listen to when it comes to, transition, or maybe just even generally that's impacted your life?
So there's a book called Unlikely Nomads by Terry Wallings. If you are in transition, that particularly in how you're thinking about how church models can function, that book I really enjoyed that book. So that book's called Unlikely Nomads by Terry Wallings. Suzanne Stabile has some amazing content on transition. The things that are in your heart, the things that you want to do might require a different version of you in order to be able to do those things. And so she kind of wrestles through some of that kind of stuff. And, also just asking the question, what is yours to do? There's things that you could do. There's things that you should do. So Suzanne Stabile, she's got a lot of great stuff too. So some of her stuff, and she was a guest on my podcast. Trying to think if there's anybody else. Yeah, those are a couple places you could start.
Great. Who is one person that you think everyone should know about?
Jeez, Pete, that's a holy cow. That's a great question. Who is one person I think everybody should know about? Let me think, man. I'm supposed to answer this quickly. Holy cow. Is it okay if I take a second to think?
Oh, yeah. No, you're fine.
You know what? I think everybody should know about my son, Noah Doyle. Noah Doyle Visuals on Instagram. Go check out some of his work.
All right. Shout out to the son. Okay, give me one more person. Leadership wise. Maybe it's maybe it was a book you read. Maybe it's someone recent that you're like, you've come across in the last few months. You're like, man, this person is, I love everything they're doing.
Yeah, that's good. Let me hold on, man. I hate to make it take this long, but
no, you're fine. This makes for the suspense. I hate Google's.
Just trying to see who I've been following on
like, Siri. What are the
Instagram.
most influential people of 2026?
Well, okay. This is going to be this is more of a music recommendation, but if you are in transition, if you're grieving, if there's things that you've lost, he's a singer-songwriter. His name's Steven Wilson Jr. I'm not saying he's necessarily like that you're going to sing his songs on Sunday morning, but his album, Father Son, like it's all about the loss of his father. So like there's a lot of transition tied up in there. And I mean, dude, I don't know, man. I might have to get back to you on this one.
No, it's good. I love it. Those are great answers. And I greatly appreciate you taking the time, being on here and having this conversation, sharing. Thank you for your content and because it has helped me, and I'm believing that this conversation will give someone some hope, or just even, hey, you're not alone, you're not crazy, it is hard, it is hard, you can get through it. And if you are listening to this and you got to this point, I want to encourage you to reach out to Evan, follow him, ask him any questions, let's do his content, because isolation and allowing shame to keep you isolated is what's really going to hurt you in the long run. And I promise you, they're great people that have made it through hard times, and sometimes you just need someone like Evan to that is willing to have those hard conversations and share what he's been through. And obviously what you've shared here is only a minute part. We could get into so many more things, but obviously you got a podcast too, and I'll put that in the description links and send people your way. And so again, thank you for all that you're doing and continue to do, and appreciate your time, and look forward to talking again. And if you are listening, thanks again for listening. Make sure to like, subscribe, share this with someone if they're going through something that, or if you think this podcast would help them, and we will see you on the next episode.